Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're new around here and you want to find out a little bit more about what we do, you can head on over to officehours.global. We're a Q&A all day, 7 days a week. And we're here to answer your questions on media and production. So if you've got questions, you can fire up Makana. There you can also vote on the other questions, chat with other producers. If you're not in Makana, never fear. We've got askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global, and that's open 24/7. So if you come across something throughout your day, you need some help on it, askofficehours.global, enter the question, and we'll get it in that day or the next day. And then we got a great panel to answer questions. Speaking of that, Alexander, let's get into that first question.
The first question this morning is from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. I have an inquiry to support esports. Any advice about covering live gaming competitions? Thanks.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I have a limited experience here, but I'll give you a couple things to think about as you work on this. Number one is you're going to always want to be able to go back to the players. So for most of these, what we do is we put a camera for every player over top of their monitor. You're going to want to have that straight-on shot. You may have other shots that you're going to use, but you're going to want that straight-on shot that's available to you all the time as you get reactions, as you oftentimes will do a picture-in-picture with them to make that work. So I've used these little micro cinemas, the Blackmagic micro studios are really good. You can shade them. You can do all the other things. The thing to think about also is that you're going to need really wide-angle lenses. So a lot of times we use like 8mm, lenses on the end of those things so that we can really capture them. It makes it a little bit more aggressive looking to some degree. So think about that. Now, with one of the esports that we did, we actually took a switcher and dedicated it to we took a 1ME switcher and dedicated it to every single player. That way we could build their graphics and independently work on that while we did everything else. Those all fed into a much larger switcher, a 4ME. And this was previous to the Constellation. And then so that way we really had our own MEs essentially dedicated to every player, and we were able to kind of work through those things. So that's one thing to think about there. Another thing to think about are comms. So they're going to want to talk to each other. So you have to figure out, and oftentimes there's a lot of different tools that they're going to use, but you have to talk to them about how the teams are going to want to talk to each other and whether you can broadcast that. So sometimes they don't want to broadcast it. Usually they do. I mean, usually you want to broadcast it at this point because it's part of the show. So, but you have to figure out how you're going to, and there's a lot of different ways of handling that, but you really have to work. It depends on what tools they're using for their games, whether it's Discord or other things that they use to talk to each other. Figure out how you're going to plumb in and let them have the experience they're used to, but also have you be able to pull that audio cleanly out of it. Some people will put little mics, there for them. I prefer to get the headset. I feel like the headset feels more like when you hear them talking, you're hearing what they're hearing, and that's a little harder to sort out. So think about that there. So from there, the question is also the games. So do the games some of the games have builds that are available that are allow you to have, phantom players. That's going to let you have people that are there that the gamers don't see that are shooting the video. Does the game have that? It's on, some of them do, some of them don't. Some of them don't make those public. So those are things to kind of think about there. But otherwise, it's just, there's a lot of, those are the basic things that you should look at. You do have to use a lot of cutting in cameras on stage. It's not that exciting. It's a bunch of people sitting around on a thing. So you really have to figure out how you're gonna really get to people's gameplay. Make sure to think about editing too fast gets a lot of negative comments because people can't. They want to see what's going on, but they want to feel the player. So a lot of times if you cut too quickly, or we've gotten some negative feedback about that because we cut it like a regular show. And people are like, whoa, I didn't, he was about to do, and you have to really, the other thing is having a TD that knows the game helps a lot because they know what they're looking at. We've brought TDs in that haven't done esports, and the problem is they don't know the game. So they're cutting what looks interesting to them that's not interesting to the viewer. And so those are other things to kind of consider.
Next question.
Next question is from Jeffrey Reyes in Bronx, New York. From the microphone selection episode from May 1st, Laura said for most offices you want a dynamic mic versus condenser, which is much more sensitive to ambient sounds. But with technologies like Noise Assist and NVIDIA Broadcast, does that change the equation?
Alexander, start us off.
So that's very true. There are a lot of condenser mics that are very, very sensitive. In general, yes, they don't work as well in a poorly treated acoustic space. It's not always the case. You can find some condenser microphones that have tighter polar patterns or better off-axis rejection. So, for example, if you look at a cardioid polar pattern, which is by far the most popular, where you get most of the rejection from 180 degrees off-axis from the capsule, which is the rear of the microphone. You take a dynamic mic and a condenser mic with the same polar pattern. You have to really look at the specs of what that microphone can do. For example, like I have an AKG C414 with different polar patterns, and I actually have it set to hypercardioid. So it has even better off-axis rejections on the sides of the microphone. So it depends on the environment that you're using, and certainly there are tools out there that offer broadband noise reduction too, like Noise Assist and the NVIDIA Broadcast stuff on their GPUs. That works really well, and you can make those microphones work in environments where the acoustics aren't that great, and you have like fans going and you have other stuff going. So yes, those technologies can help, and also a lot of people don't realize this too, but there are condenser microphones that are used in live performance all the time. And you would think, well, how does that work? You got noisy stage, you got crowd noise. They can work. I mean, Neumann makes condenser microphones that are handheld. They're designed for vocalists. Same with Shure, same with Sennheiser. So it is possible.
Marty?
Well, things like Noise Assist and other types of noise reduction technologies are what I would consider repair tools. You know, they're things that you need to add on top of your signal to correct problems. But if you can start with a clean signal, right, by using the correct microphone to begin with, or a better microphone to begin with, then you're going to have a cleaner signal all the way through the signal chain instead of, garbage in and then trying to fix it. So as Alexander was saying, there are microphones with different polar patterns, and Laura was demonstrating the newer microphone, the new microphone that has excellent off-axis rejection, but you do need to get close to it because of that. And dynamic microphones, yes, they are less sensitive. However, they need more gain, which could kind of have an opposite effect. When you need more gain, you're also bringing up the background noise. So it's a matter, I've got dozens of microphones here, and I, offline went in and did some listening tests in my fairly noisy environment here, and figured out which microphones, dynamics and condensers, and in the condenser multi-patterns, which pattern seemed to work well with the nature of my voice and with the rejection that I needed.
Courtney?
Well, it depends. It depends on the type of show that you're doing and whether or not you prefer to have the microphone in the shot or not in the shot. I find that dynamic microphones, it takes a lot more energy or variations in sound pressure, which is what we call sound, to move that engine inside the dynamic microphone, which is a moving coil. And so it takes a lot more pressure on that diaphragm to move that coil. So it has to be a little bit closer to you to differentiate between the signal, which is the voice, and the noise, which is everything else in the room. And the problem is with the dynamic microphone, I find that you have to have it pretty much lined up with your mouth so that the maximum sound pressure coming out of your mouth, if you use it off axis, you drops it, it's a couple of dBs, and now you got to crank it up a little bit more, and now you're bringing up the self noise of your microphone preamp. So it's a trade-off in that respect. With a condenser microphone like the Stellar X2, I can have it a little further away. I can still scratch the microphone with one hand touching my mouth. So it's not that far away, but it is out of the shot, and it is in line with my mouth. And I have a lot of, you're right, it does pick up a lot of stuff in the room because it's much more sensitive to variations in sound pressure than a dynamic mic. So if you have personalized audio on Zoom, that does a great job of filtering out the background noise, including, concussive noises or anything that's not your voice after you train it with your voice a little bit. Or if you have noise assist, it does the same thing. So if you have access to noise reduction, a condenser microphone will get you a lot cleaner full response without having to have the microphone in the shot and right in front of you.
Next question.
Next one's from Paul Walhus in Austin, Texas. The TCL 98-inch Google TV I got as an LED wall is 50 by 85 inches. Would the Husky hand crank cart mentioned by Douglas C., which is 26 inches at the low point, be low enough, and how would I secure the TV to it?
Courtney?
If it's a hand crank cart, I imagine it's just like a tabletop that you can crank. I looked for this Husky hand crank cart. I couldn't find something, but I assume it's a adjustable height table of some sort. You're trying to set your TV on top of it, in which case you have to depend on gravity to hold that TV and not be knocked off the top of that cart. I wouldn't like that situation, and that you've got to raise a platform up and down. I'd propose something more like this, which is this is a mobile TV stand for up to 100-inch TVs, up to 250 pounds. It has wheels on the bottom of it, and it's not hand crank. And that is one of the problems. When you get to a monitor that size, raising it and lowering it is always a two-person operation. You need to either take the monitor off, raise the stand up to the level that you need it, and put it back on. And this type of VESA mount has these rails across the back here, and these two vertical pieces attached to the side, to the VESA holes in the back of that monitor. And then it hangs on this, and then it has a little screw at the bottom here on each side that secures it to this, so that you can easily, with two people, bring it up and just hang it on that, and then screw in the little screw at the bottom, and Bob's your uncle.
Marty. Sorry.
But you should take the monitor off it to change its height, because you got to raise the posts up independently.
Marty, go ahead.
Danger, Will Robinson. That TV is 120 pounds and costs $5,000. What is your tolerance for risk? I fully agree with Courtney that this requires a VESA mount on a very solid stand to not only protect the TV, but to protect anybody who is around it, and to protect your interests. No, I would not put a TV like that on any small tabletop, especially one that has wheels that can move, and especially one that is height adjustable, because it just won't support that kind of weight.
And Alex?
So I'm not going to give you the cheap way to solve this. But what I'm going to tell you is, don't put it on a table. Don't set it on anything other than the ground. It's a big thing, unless it's a really big table. Generally, you are going to want to use some version of what was mentioned by Courtney and Marty, which is a French cleat that is going to latch onto that bar that goes across. And how you do that, whether it's the wall, whether it's a stand, it should be one of those things. It's a much different way to mount it than trying to set it down on its feet. I know they send feet with it. You should not do that. You want to put it on something that's going to be there. I would recommend, again, a very, very robust, not just something that says it can handle 250 pounds, but something that is really a robust stand that's going to be able to roll over things. You're going to want to be able to move it around. The second thing is I got to tell you, I've probably ordered 50 or 60 stands. Nothing like a motorized riser. However you set that up, what happens is people will tell you that you don't need it, but the function of the fact that you have to take it off, adjust it, or do it down, or destroy your forearm to get it up and down, it limits the number of times you do it, which limits your creativity. You don't put the monitor where it belongs, because it would be too hard. And you always have to look at that. When you look at tools that are like minimum viable product, minimum viable product means that you don't do what you should do with it, and you would do with it if it was easy to do. That's why all my monitors, these smaller monitors, are all on arms. They're all on arms because wherever I want them, I put them. And if I put them on stands, I'd be like, well, I'll get around to it some other time. So the ease of use is really important. And if you've already spent the money on this, spend the money. I don't know, with a TCL, it's going to cost you, with a motorized arm, it's going to cost you $700 or $800, with a motorized lifter to do that with the stand. And you're going to put in the comments like, couple weeks after you get it, you're going to thank me for it because it's life changing. You just push the little button, and it goes up, and then you push the little button, it goes down.
Courtney, go ahead.
And one other thing, there are stands that are designed to hold fairly heavy monitors. They use two stainless steel 2-inch diameter poles up and down, and then they have these cleats that go over the back of them that have screws that go into those poles that you can adjust the height on them. The problem with those, they're cantilever designed, so they're allowed to get you close to a wall, which means it's got a huge steel base plate on it. It weighs about 300 pounds, 250 pounds or so, that steel base plate. With these less massive ones like this, you got to realize you're not going to be able to back that thing up close to a wall. So if you've got a wall behind you, any one of these rolling stands like this that supports the weight in the middle of 4 rollers like this doesn't have a lot of weight at the bottom to counterbalance the weight of that monitor, especially if you're going to raise it up high. And so bear in mind that you're not going to be able to put it right up close to a wall. So if you're limited in wall space, you might look for one that's cantilevered.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, and what I will say is that corporate folks and home folks put their monitors against the walls. Production people always create gaps so they can walk behind it so they can rewire it. so we always have a couple feet behind there so that we can get there.
Next question.
Next one's from the QR code. We got Eric Price from Kansas City. Alex often expresses concerns about the potential effects of CMEs. It looks like there is a big one coming. Any precautions we should take? And there's an article there.
We got about 30 minutes. Jason?
All right. So, yeah, I looked at the article and from there got to the NOAA. There are 3 different parts for coronal mass ejections: geomagnetic storms, solar radiation storms, and then radio blackouts. And those are the 3 parts to this. And if you look up at the top of their site, what you'll see is the next 24 hours observed maximums. And there is a G4, which is severe for geomagnetic influx, which according to this says widespread voltage control problems and some protective systems will mistakenly trip out key assets on the grid. That's not ideal. But other than that, I think that geomagnetic is the least, I think it's the least bad part of, if you're going to have something being 4. So I'll let Alex take it from there.
Alex?
Yeah, one of the problems that we have is that we don't know how it's already left. If they're warning us about the sun, about this for this weekend, it's already left the building, right? So it left the sun a couple days ago. So they know it's coming here. The problem is they don't know how big it is until it hits. There's a satellite that the European Union has out there that's about 900,000 miles away, and it sits between us and the sun. And when it hits that satellite, or that it's not even really a satellite. It's a space vehicle or measurement device. When it hits that, we'll know how big it is. And the reason that that's important, I was just reading an article from MIT Review. They had a problem. They lost a whole bunch of satellites from SpaceX. Lost a bunch of their little satellites. That they lost 20 of them or 20 plus of them because they saw a CME pop out. When they thought, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's not a thing of concern. When it hit that satellite, they knew it was a big deal. And what it does is it changes the viscosity of the atmosphere. And so it actually a whole bunch of satellites will all lose their positioning. So they slow down, and suddenly we don't know where any of the satellites are. So again, it can take days for them to to recalculate where all those satellites went. So that's how it can affect a lot of things. Now, we have to remember this one probably, we don't know yet, we won't know until 30 minutes before it gets here, but probably is not going to be anything near the Carrington event, which was, like they said that one had a big effect, but that was 1/10 the size of the Carrington event, and they don't know how big CMEs are because the Carrington event is the only one that's ever happened at that scale when we had wires. So the problem is it's the wires that pick up all this electromagnetic, and so they had, you had telegraph offices. It took down the telegraph system. You had telegraph offices actually catching fire. You had a lot of things happening that were pretty intense, in 1859, if you want to search for that. The statistics are 12% chance every decade that that we will see something. There's a 12% chance we'll see one as big as the Carrington event. We don't know what would happen in our current environment if we were hit with one that big because we have all these electronics now. There's a report, it's like 192 pages long that I did listen to. I put it into a PDF listener and listened to the whole thing from NASA and a lot of other folks going, this is probably 10 years ago going, this is a really big deal. Like, we need to pay attention to this. Like, there's a lot of people in Washington, D.C. and other places that are really worried about this thing. So it's not me being worried about it. It's a lot of them being worried about a big one could really devastate. I mean, no one wants to talk about the numbers, but the numbers are really big. Like, not big like COVID big, like big like really big, like 10 times, 100 times the size, 10 times the size of COVID. So these are really big numbers of what could happen if a major CME hit the Earth. So there's nothing to do other than just enjoy the lights. You're not going to be able to fix anything between now and the weekend. But things to think about are, if something hit, even if it was a medium-sized one, what you'd want to be able to do is know that you have food and water for a week or two, at least. The societies that believe that you're not, you can't be in their society if you don't have 2 years of goods. They're going to do okay. so they'll sit there and just watch their neighbors panic. So anyway, but you do want to have a little bit of a buffer there, because if one of these actually hits, and the reason they say it every decade, by the way, is because we go through solar system. The sun gets active and then gets not active and then gets active. Right now, we're in the most active. So the highest point where we're going to see the most potential for CMEs is the next 2 or 3 years, and then it'll die down it'll slowly get less, and then the next time will be the middle of the next decade.
And just as an aside, I think this is got to be the best. It looks like it's from a sci-fi movie. Active space weather conditions through the weekend from NOAA.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. So you look at that, you're like, oh my God, is this real life? So Courtney, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, besides what all you other people have advised, I agree. Not much you can do unless you're a billionaire and can move to another planet really quickly. Get out your camera, and if you live in North America, you'll have a chance to see some northern lights that you won't see very often. And of course, to protect yourself, you always have to make a nice tinfoil hat. And if you do put this little point on the top, you can see a little bit of corona discharge from it, and it makes it much more interesting.
Next question.
Next question is from Francis Fry in Cambridge, Massachusetts. What is the best source for a tutorial for ZoomISO? I find it daunting to use myself and near impossible to teach to somebody else. Alex?
It sounds like we need to do a ZoomISO second hour and kind of walk through it. I think that because I use it all the time, and the first time I used it, I was like, this is crazy. And there's a lot of things that you can use. There's only a handful of things that you need to use, so that's the thing you have to understand, that there's a lot of power in ZoomISO, and you don't need to use all, like on a daily basis, all I do is route video and audio out of ZoomISO. It's really hard for me to show you because I'm not in a meeting, but we'll do it. We should do a second hour on that because it'd be great, and we'll bring it into this meeting, and then we can kind of show what those things look like and how they tie in. I think that talking about ZoomISO specifically, but also just the feeds, I think there's probably an hour of talking about not only ZoomISO, but how it feeds into Mimo Live or vMix or other things I don't know if I can talk about. So the things. So we should wait until June, and then we'll talk about those things. But we'll talk. I think that talking about how to pull ISO feeds. I think the general conversation is how to pull isolated feeds from Zoom, and ZoomISO can be part of that discussion. So let's do a whole second hour. We'll put that in the list of things to do.
And I will speak for those of us who recently went from ZoomISO is a little esoteric and a little too expensive for me just to play with to, hey, I've got an events license. Like, there's a whole new class of people who could benefit from this. So we're really excited. Next question.
Next question is from the QR code from Ignacio Madero in Madrid. I am looking for remote intercom systems that are reliable and affordable, if such a thing exists. Any recommendation?
Guy?
Yeah, we're just using Unity comms. We're using it here on the show, and on another show that I'm on, we're using consistently. We're using it not only for that show, but that agency also uses it for other shows. it just runs on our mobile phones, and all of us are using these same thing that Alex uses, these Shocks Open Comms $159 Bluetooth headsets. And then for a backup, we're all in a Zoom room or a Zoom meeting with a breakout room. So in case for some reasons comms fails, which they haven't failed, we've had instances where people have had individual issues with their phone or some kind of, because you can put it as an app on your computer. We've had issues with people just having computer type individual issues. But for the most part, once you get it running solid, it's solid. And I recommend Basecamp Global, which is Tucker's company. So Tucker hosts, you can run this on a Mac, and the setup is not fun, and then the licensing is not fun. So if you contact Tucker, he has a instance that runs in the cloud on Mac Stadium. So again, you could do all this yourself, but you can also reach out to a guy like Tucker. If you're into the experimental stuff, Space Comms is another app that you can that's in beta that you can take a look at. Another one is VCom, and I'll put a link to the chat for VCom. And it gets crazier from there. At our old building, we also used to use our Zoom phones, where Zoom Phone is a service where you can actually just push a button and you could open up an intercom at an individual station. So like if I saw on the camera and somebody in shipping was shipping and they couldn't actually respond, I can just open up their mic and start listening. And you could do that with Zoom Rooms, where you can say auto accept incoming requests. You could turn on a camera and a microphone given the correct permission. So it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to run a show, there's all kinds of Riedel and some of the bigger bad boys, RTS. But for cheap, Hollyland is another one that's, depending on how remote, if you want to tie it in with Dante and all that stuff. And we have Studio Technologies guys in here that have some boxes that will allow you to tie that stuff together.
Alex?
Yeah, for remote, I think that Unity is the most popular, and we use it a lot for some of the shows that we have. A lot of people know how to use it, so when they're tying them in, and I will say that it's a huge advantage over, Unity itself is pretty limited compared to other online, in my opinion, still the best online one that's out there, but not the cheapest, is ClearCom. ClearCom's Agent IC gives you an enormous amount of flexibility. So I can open up an iPad and I can have directs. I can have a mix of directs and PLs and all kinds of other things and 24 keys, and they're all on the same page, and I can talk to them all at the same time. Unity gets limited to 6 per page, which is frustrating. Because what happens is that each of those pages belong to their own group, so you can't multi-key multiple groups at the same time from different pages. So, it's a concept I think that is really old, but it is something that's effective, and a lot of people know how to use it, especially after COVID. We just used it earlier this week. And what we did is we can tie those into, and again, Unity is well known, and then we internally have some folks that really know how to use it. Tucker is a great solution for. He's helped me in the past with a lot of comms, and I think I would definitely. That's I just know it as Tucker's company, but what's the
Basecamp? Basecamp Global, BSCMP.
Basecamp Global, and so it's a great solution to just solve this for you and have you not have to build it up. Now, what we did. On this last one, we had a broadcast truck. So there's a whole truck, and it's got its own comms, and it's got its own setup. You can take Unity Connect, and you can connect your Unity to that Unity Connect and spit it out in a way that you can tie it into the comms that are in the truck. And that way, we were talking to people who had headsets and listening to people who had headsets. So you're not just limited. That's where when you get into these big productions, you may have something that's all there, but you can get into a 4-wire to 2-wire connection and be able to actually tie into the truck or into the local comms and have that available in Unity on a couple of channels. And we talked to a couple. We were able to talk to people there that were necessary, but also we were also able to. And again, we have all these other folks that are just on Unity. So that's the whole thing, is they're all on Unity. They all know how to use Unity. They're not talking to the truck at all, but we were able to let the client also listen to the truck comm during the show. So what you could hear is they knew where they were in the cadence. They also knew if anything goes wrong, they know that too. So but they also but the main thing is they're able to listen to it and hear it, and a lot of us are. And so those tie-ins are pretty useful. And again, because Unity just works on the phone, it's a very reasonable solution at a reasonable price. And definitely, though, if you're not going to do it all the time, go to someone like Tucker and have them build it for you.
Next question.
Next question is from Talalak Lopez, waterman, somewhere in transit. Has anyone else found very long processing times for media created in the BMD camera app when uploading to frame.io? We're talking days, not hours.
Go ahead, Alex.
I have not had that problem, and I have uploaded a fair number of things from my phone, so I'm not sure. Let us know what your settings are, and maybe we can take a look at it. Let us know what your settings, because my settings haven't created that experience. But it may be a codec or somehow how you're saving it from the Blackmagic camera that may cause that to take more time. So let us know exactly what you're using there.
Next question.
Next question comes from Paul Walhus in Austin, Texas. Champagne gear on beer budget department. What is a minimalist event coverage phone rig with no frills that will both stream and record at the same time with an iPhone and or an Android phone as the basis?
Go ahead, Alex.
In the current environment, there's no close second to the iPhone at the moment. From the iPhone 15, the S24 Samsung is very reasonable and very close to the iPhone 14. But the 15 jumped a couple years in 1 year, and so you're going to get a much different experience with the 15 than you did with the 14. What you want to look at is there's a couple things you have to think about. One is you're going to want to, if you're going to stream it, you're going to use the phone, probably use the phone as the streaming apparatus. And if you do that, you need to have something else, an external monitor that's getting the output from the camera potentially so that you can record on that monitor. But you're not going to try to record on the phone. So you have an external monitor that's higher up. That monitor is going to record it, and then you can have a monitor that's going to stream, like a Zato Connect from Atomos does have streaming capabilities, and so does some of the monitors from Blackmagic. So you could have the monitor stream and the camera record, and but you got to have one of them do one of them. Now you're not going to be able to record. You're not going to be I don't think, I haven't tried to record log and stream 709. It's possible that you could stream HDR and record HDR from it, but I haven't tried to do that. And I don't know if the phone apps will allow for that to happen. The other thing that is, where a lot of us are waiting for, and hopefully we'll be able to talk about sometime in the near future. We think that somewhere in the future that we're going to see stereo streaming, which will be really interesting. So if you think about the stuff that you can get from the phone is generating, you can record from an iPhone, you can record in stereo. And I got to tell you, the stereo quality is very high. Like it's a very comfortable stereo. It's not quite as aggressive as you would have from normal cameras, but it's very comfortable, like gives you dimensionality to it, which is pretty cool. So those are a couple things to kind of consider as you work through that. So so I think that, but thinking about separating the streaming and the monitoring, the other thing to think about is how you're going to get audio in. What I did with the phone rig that I built was I built it with two electrosonic systems. And so I have two electrosonic receivers. Those go into a MixPre 3, which then gives me the opportunity to do noise assist if I want to. I can also record the audio separately to the MixPre 3. I can then deliver that back to the phone, and the Blackmagic recorder will see it will see up to 4 channels. so you have that available as well.
Courtney.
I by no means am a streamer or authority on any of this stuff, but I might ask to pick Alex's brain a little bit here to ask him, would an iPad be a good streaming device, especially if it's connected over a fairly high-speed Wi-Fi link? Because you have a bigger monitor, and is it better to record? A lot of the streaming services offer recording in the cloud, like YouTube, I believe, will record your stream at the same time, so it moves all the recording to the cloud, so it takes the onus off the hardware that you're using, so you could use a cheaper phone or a cheaper iPad to stream with and give you a larger monitor. Would that work, Alex? I'm asking if you've ever done something like that, because I see these on YouTube all the time, people that stream just off their phone or their iPad.
There's a couple of reasons I have done it. So you can do it with the iPad. There's a couple of reasons not to. Number one, it's a little unwieldy. So your tendency, when you have a phone, you're going to build a rig around it. I think I've shown the rig that I built earlier. You're going to build this rig around it, and the issue is that that rig gets a lot bigger because it gets 4 times larger. It's big, and you got all this stuff going on, and it is. So that's one challenge. The other challenge is that the cellular you could get cellular into the iPad. The cellular and the compactness of the phone and the quality of the camera on the iPhone 15 is higher than the quality of the cameras on the iPads currently. And so you're going to get a better image from the iPhone 15. And I'll be honest, it looks weird. And so what happens is now I'm not against looking weird, but I like to look like I went way over the top from a technical perspective, like that giant one that we took to NAB. But I'm a little like, when you bring an iPad into it, you get much more like sideways views of things than you do with a phone. People are really used to looking at phones. People are not used to looking at it. It affects your content. Like how people look at it. And I know that it shouldn't be that way. We always say it shouldn't be about how people look, but it is. And so like, for instance, I showed this big rig that I had with an ambisonic mic and, this reverse thing. The way that rig normally, how I've been testing it in the field hasn't been without all of that stuff. Like, it's a much smaller rig because that would get, by having it feel odd, it affects how people, literally how they talk in front of it. So you have to be conscious of that.
And I might point out that, having the world's greatest 4K camera, if you're going to be streaming probably in 1080p, some could stream in 4K live, but probably 1080p.
I actually don't know if you can stream 4K live.
Yeah.
But you can stream 1080p. But the thing is that what I want to record, if I'm going to record there, I want to record in ProRes. Like, I don't want to record H.264. So, because you can't do anything with that. Like, if there's anything wrong with it, you can't fix it. And if I can't fix it, why record it? Like, to me, to your point, let YouTube record it if I'm not going to fix it. Right. Like, I'm not going to, so I prefer, like, when I'm looking at my solutions, I'm looking at solutions that can be color corrected and that can be edited easily and so on and so forth. And so that's why the iPhone is really, the work that it takes to take an S24 footage and get it ready for editing is much different than recording ProRes.
And also, it depends on your interactivity. If you want to see a live chat window and interact with your audience as you're streaming, you're going to want a bigger monitor that you can see the chat on and read.
And you should never do that.
Alex, but there are a lot of people that do that and
horrible.
Interact with their audience,
and it ruins their shows. It ruins their. We do it here because we use a separate app. We don't use the stupid chat functions and all these social media things. They're all dumb. They're because what it does is those live chats create commas, comma after comma, like long lines of commas in your show. It is not. It is horrible content, and people are only putting up with it because they don't know how to do anything better. It is a horrible way to do it. When I watch it, I can only watch it for a couple of minutes. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to go. Like, it's just too many commas, and it makes really slow content. And the reason that everyone's all in this whole, like, let's destabilize our entire stream so that we can have ultra low latency is because their chat function is broken. So the chat function, so they're fixing something over here to make up for the thing that is broken over here. It is insane to watch, and because once you fix that, it can be 20 seconds. It doesn't matter, and then you get a much higher quality stream. It's much more stable for everyone watching. If you have a 100 meg connection, it doesn't really matter. But if you have if you're watching on your phone in the field, out on a bus or something like that, that ultra low latency means that you're going to crack up all the time. It's just really a bad idea.
Go ahead, Marty.
Since Paul asked about a beer budget, and this would be the only time that I would even consider something like this, is a platform, and there may be others, like Switcher Studio, which is an iPhone, iPad-based Wi-Fi communication between devices. It uses an iPad Pro, and the platform is essentially a software video switcher that uses other devices, other iDevices as cameras. One of the issues is interfacing audio to it and getting it on shore power rather than relying on batteries. But it's a pretty comprehensive video switcher and streaming device all in a platform. And it's pretty economical, and it can do a good job if you've got solid Wi-Fi.
Next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. I read an article about Taylor Swift rearranging the majority of her show mid-tour. With the coordination between departments needed, wouldn't it be harder to rearrange a high-level show post-rehearsal, not just dragging elements around in QLab?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, it depends on how complex the transitions are between numbers. All of these big rock shows rehearse the numbers. They rehearse a number and generally the song doesn't change from venue to venue. The instrumentation, the background singers, the choreography, the costumes, the background videos, whatever you have is related to that particular song. The SMPTE timing track is for that particular song and starts at the top of the song with a countdown the drummer hears, and he leads it off to the local performers in sync with the SMPTE time code playback or click track that other people hear in their IFB in their monitors. So rearranging the order of the songs, a lot of times artists will rearrange the order of the songs every night, depending upon the crowd and the city that they're in and the length of the show. So they're generally able to handle it and can, as you say, just move elements around in their automated show control that will just rearrange the songs in the right order. The stage manager has to pay attention to the rundown so that he has all the performers arranged and ready so people know that, this song doesn't have background singers on it, so they can take a break for 5 minutes, etc. So the stage managers need to know that stuff ahead of time. Changes in the rundown can kind of throw a wrench into the works, as I've worked as a stagehand on many big shows in the past. And that was before we had all these computerized rundowns. So it was always a lot of people on comm shouting, "We're dropping such and such number," and there was a lot of scrambling backstage. But generally the show is set beforehand, and the number of encore songs that they do is variable,
Alex?
Yeah, Mickey said that rearranging set lists is no big deal. It is pretty much rearranging the queue list and triggering a different queue. Just deliver printouts and emails to everyone done. This is often done right in the middle. This is often done right in the middle of the show by the talent simply announcing, and that's no problem. Even time-coded performances with no problem to move around, just trigger a different queue, and that queue's timeout will control everything else. And we hear it in the back end. You'll hear don't roll the next song or don't do the, there's live elements that are actually going on, and when that actually happens, and it's very, very fluid. You want to think of each song as, now, changing the mechanics of the song is a thing. Mickey may disagree with me, but like changing the elements of how the lighting works and how the effects work and how that stuff is probably not what they're doing. What they are doing is moving the songs around, and I think that moving the songs around or creating different spaces, those are modular, and they'll just pop. You just want to think of them as a little box that is the song. You do have to think about logistics of exactly what Courtney was talking about, of who was on stage before, how long do they need to change, there's all those things, but the mechanics of actually running it is relatively straightforward.
The other thing, Douglas, don't buy into the hype too much. She just released another new album, so she's probably known exactly how the show is going to get rearranged for months. Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York asks, cool fireside chat with Andy last night. It inspired me to look at all the app Zoom offers besides OSC and ISO and any other fun ones the panelists like to use for shows.
Alex?
Yeah, and a quick aside, we're going to be doing more of these fireside chats. It's been hard to schedule some folks into these into the morning because it's early in the morning. so we're ramping up. We've got we had Colleen Henry last year. We have Andy this week. Next week is Emery Wells will be joining us from Frame.io or from Adobe now to talk about his journey. And these are more philosophical conversations. We do talk about tech, but it's open to questions. It's still live, and you can open to questions. But it's a much smaller show than what we do here. So stay tuned for those. They're not going to be on a certain day. They're going to be on when we can schedule the person to be there, and so they may even show up at different times of the day. So it's really it's a much more just kind of, we found that, or a much more flexible way for us to find things places to go. To answer your question specifically, the one that we're really, tiles is something that we're really excited about. Zoom Rooms, of course, is not really a liminal thing, but it's another thing that a lot of us are using to pull feeds out. The new the Pro AV solution, which is the high density, we use the high density and Unreal Engine inside of for our coverage of NAB, and it was like Zoom Room was not working at all. Pro AV came in, boom, it was working. Of what we needed to do. And so I think that there's a lot of these tools that are coming out that are really exciting.
Guy?
Yeah, great episode. That was awesome to have Andy on. Just to answer the question as well, Zoom Rooms is something that we use in production quite heavily, and just this week they dropped 6.0, which adds the feature of being able to have NDI as 2 more camera inputs. So when you go into the back end, you can say a main camera is this NDI source, and then you can have 2 additional. You can't have isolated audio on those 2, but you can have 3 now, which is pretty cool because we use Zoom Rooms in ways that you wouldn't traditionally use them. So we're pushing feeds in and pulling feeds out and using it just wildly differently than what it was intended. And this is the beauty of having Andy giving feedback to the rest of the team as to how some of us are getting crazy and using it in ways that they could modify a little bit to make it super helpful for us to run it in the cloud and things like that.
Alex?
Yeah, I really don't think of the shows that we do. I feel like they should call it the virtual event engine. So the V, because it is really it handles a lot of our audio, our video, transports, everything else, and we're not really thinking about Zoom in the traditional way anymore. We're really thinking about, I've got a bunch of hardware on one side, I'm going to throw it all online, and I'm going to pull it out somewhere else, maybe online, maybe via NDI, maybe in the cloud, maybe on the ground, and that process, I think, is incredibly powerful, and no one else is doing it. Like this is not like when people talk about like how can I run my event on Teams? You're always like, you poor soul. like it's not going to work. Like it's not going to work like this. You're not going to have you're just going to be having your hands tied together and then taped.
Next question.
Next question is from the QR code from Gracie in Ottawa. Is there a device that can help prevent audio feedback in a meeting setting that has individual participant microphones and earpieces for amplification and simultaneous interpretation?
Marty?
I'm going to assume this is a corporate-style conference event with an audience and live speakers. And so there would be 2 sources of feedback. One would, from speaker to microphone would be your main source of feedback. The earpieces for interpretation, probably not a source of feedback because they're not listening to the microphones. There are devices out there, commonly known as feedback eliminators. You can find them, some used ones from Sabine, which worked well. Behringer has one. But, I wouldn't really recommend them for most things because unless you really understand what it does. And what it does, it's a series of 12 or 24 very sharp notch filters that can automatically identify an occurrence of feedback after it's happened or while it's happening, and then apply that notch to kill that frequency. But, whether or not you're using a device like this, it really is important before the event starts to take measures to tune the speakers to the acoustics of the room, to flatten them out, and then to identify what frequencies are most likely to feedback, and then apply notch filters at the back end of your mixer before they get to the speakers. So these are measures that I would do in every event to avoid the likelihood of feedback from the microphones. And that's really important because, it's not just feedback in the room, but it's feedback to your live stream. Getting a natural sound out of your microphones as well. So tuning the room, tuning the microphones, doing feedback, filtering, again, by applying very sharp notch filters at the last stage of your mixer before it heads out to the speakers. These are important measures to do.
Alex?
Yeah, and you want to start at the chain, exactly what Marty's talking about. Start at the chain. Start the chain at where's the speaker placement and the microphones, and where the speakers are set, where they're pointed, making sure that as best you can, the mics stay away from the plane of the speaker, stay behind the planes of the speaker. Makes a big difference in ringing. Then picking the kind of mic. So mics with high off-axis rejection are going to be, whether those are lav mics. You'll see some of these ones that look like big pills. Some of the DPA ones are very directional. They're going to have a little less sensitivity to that process. And then also, that's why oftentimes you see a lot of things that are getting as close to the speaker's mouth as you can, because it's going to push off a lot of those things that are just not as sensitive to it. Then, again, the notch filters and ringing out the room, because those frequencies will be different in every setting. It's not, so you have to do this ahead of time to find what are the frequencies for this room with these speakers, with these mics, with this environment is going to get notched out to make that work. And you're going to do that ahead of time. And then the main thing, I don't know exactly why simultaneous interpretation, unless it's happening somehow in the speakers, why that would affect your returns. But those are the things to kind of take a look at. And it's really important. You can really tell the difference between a professional and an unprofessional production by whether you start hearing ringing. So someone's changed something dramatically and it wasn't rehearsed enough, or it wasn't preloaded. And as Mickey said, the best tool to make this work is a grade A1.
Next question.
Next question for me. What is the clean feed option as an output on the ATEM Mini?
Go ahead, Jason.
The clean feed output on the ATEM Mini is the program feed without your downstream keyer. And on more advanced switchers, it can be that, but a cut bus. So it doesn't have to be programmed. You can also, you can do a clean feed of bus 1. But yeah, that's what it's for.
Yeah, and a lot of folks use this if they're broadcasting their stream to multiple places that have different languages or different graphics for different markets. This is enabling you to send that out and then have that done after the fact is kind of the goal that they're trying to achieve there. Next question.
Paul Walhus in Austin, Texas asks, is DaVinci Resolve mostly a colorist tool, or does it stack up as a full-fledged video editor vis-a-vis Vegas Video, Premiere, CapCut, and Final Cut? Editing workflow not be as intuitive as dedicated editing software like Premiere or Vegas Pro?
Guy?
Yeah, it's just getting better and better and better with every iteration. So I used to teach Final Cut for years and years and years, and taught to a lot of university professors. I taught Final Cut in every major state or every major city across the United States. So I did it for a company called DV Creators, and I just really got to know that software. And when I look at the fine-tuning things like trimming frame by frame or slipping an edit, some of those things are just now starting to become keyboard shortcuts, and being able to hit like +1 frame or +2 frames with a numeric keyboard push. Some of these things that make editors fast are now the people that graduated from a Final Cut or from a Premiere, from an Avid, or from a Media 100. They have specific things that make them fast, and they need those things, and they're iterating fast enough now to where it's almost all there. And for the price, you can't beat it. I mean, you get the basic version for free, and then if you want the higher resolution. So I'm running it actually on a PC in my studio next door, and I had a client over my shoulder earlier this week. And as I was learning what I don't know, it was kind of shocking as to how intuitive it can be if you're used to coming from a Premiere or from a Final Cut. It isn't hard to learn how to use. And versus Vegas, I mean, it blows it away. I know that a lot of news stations will still use Vegas, and those guys are fast using even Edius or something like that. It's all about speed, how fast you can find that media, load it in, and get it out. And that's the other thing is, I mean, I'm a Mac guy through and through, but my PC with this 3080 Ti card in it, my exports of this hour-and-a-half video, my jaw just dropped at how fast it can kick out an hour-and-a-half encode. It's just mind-blowing. You kids have no idea. I used to have a $8,000 ice board in my computer to export this kind of stuff, and it would still take 2 days to export. So exporting this stuff in 30 minutes is like, it blows my mind how fast everything is these days.
Alex?
Yeah, for fast edits, I still tend to lean towards Final Cut just because it's a lot faster to throw things together and put them out. But anytime I have to do anything precision, and I do a lot of stuff with more than 2 channels of audio, so whether it's, a lot of it can be 5.1, 5.14, 714, Atmos, those types of things. And when we deal with those files, you can't use anything other than Resolve. I mean, I know that people think that they can do it with other things, but the Final Cut has barely touched 5.1 for a decade. Premiere, a little goofy the way it handles. I was just dealing with someone that was dealing with it in Premiere, and they couldn't figure out how to get it out. And so whether it's color, whether it's and the audio tools, they're just much more refined than the other editors, the video editors. Of course, a lot of people use Pro Tools, which is still the kind of the standard for a lot of film work. Logic is really, I talk to a lot of artists that are using Logic, but when it comes to what's really happening with Resolve is they just have a lot more engineers, and they're building up something that means you never have to export. So you never have to send your files somewhere else to be worked on and bring them back. Everything is happening inside of that workflow, and that is incredibly powerful. And I think that it's really hard to, and when they started taking it on, I was like, there's no way they're going to pull this off. This is the craziest thing, and it's going to take hundreds of engineers, a decade for them to actually make that work. And you know what they did? It took hundreds of engineers, and they spent a decade building it. And so it's a more modern architecture. It has an incredible, team that's working on it, and it actually is now getting to the point that I just didn't think it was going to get to when Blackmagic bought it. I just thought that what they were doing was just completely insane, and I was wrong.
Next question.
Zoc Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York asks, I'm attempting to do a fun song mashup in Logic, but when I import the MP3 files, the speed is set to rabbit instead of normal. Can't seem to find the right setting to change this. Any advice?
Jason?
Okay, so if I remember correctly, the rabbit just simply means that it's not getting the time signature right. If you have a real issue with the MP3 import only, I would rip it down to WAV and see if the quantizer gets it right.
Guy?
Exactly. I would just convert it into a WAV and make it so that it flattens it out and it's not a compressed file any longer. Just WAV or AIFF.
Next question.
Paul Walhus in Austin, Texas asks, Apple apologized after its Crush ad promoting the iPad Pro triggered criticism from creators and others. The ad, which was released on Tuesday, showed a hydraulic press crushing objects, including musical instruments, arcade games. Discuss.
Alex?
I can see the meeting. like we're going to show how you can compress all of these things into this little iPad. Like I'm sure that was the idea. And I always feel like this is like a Jurassic Park moment, where he goes, they were so caught up with what could be done. They didn't think about whether they should, And so I think that there was a thing of we're going to compress all this stuff into this, and they thought about it. And then, of course, without a lot of budgetary limits, they built something that actually did it, which was kind of amazing. And then really amazing video when you think about the amount of money that was required to actually pull that off. But I think that, the tone, everyone, I think the problem is if you had done this 5 years ago, I think people would have thought it was a cool ad. But artists right now are so on their heels and so worried about AI and so worried about these other bits and pieces that they're ultra sensitive to, anything that looks like it's going to pull them out of the, replace them and replace things that we look at in the past, whether or not it may. But I think that, anyway, it was visually a very interesting ad. The tone was probably off for the time that it came out.
Courtney, real quick.
Did they build it? I think it was CGI. And the straw that broke the camel's back was crushing the little emoji at the end where its little eyes bug out.
That was the best part.
And that's what drove people nuts.
It cut away. I thought that was my favorite part of the whole thing. It was all physical. Like that's all. Like there's no way that was done in CG. Like it's incredible.
And just impressive that I was impressed that they were able to get the things to break in their own little levels and their own little striations. Because you would think that at some point you're putting pressure down, and what's on the bottom is going to give first. But no, it was very boom.
That's why it's CG.
I don't know. I have a hard time believing that was CG. That was.
Oh,
it could be.
No, there was.
If it was so much better.
It was really good CG. If it was.
Yeah, it's well done.
It was a great ad. We're going to get to personal travel kits and some what we take with us when we go on the road in just a minute here. Just wanted to remind everybody we've got the weekend Q&As coming up. So Saturday is our weekend Q&A where we it's kind of also a testing ground, so we can test some different ways we do production, get some folks who aren't on the weekday show into the groove of doing things. And then Sunday's Q&A as well. That's an introspective day. So that's not something that is going to be released as a VOD. You got to be there in Makana to watch that. So we recommend you come in. We talk again more philosophically and take a look at if you've got questions about office hours. Sunday is your day. The other thing that we always do on the weekends is we have at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern on Saturday, we have a regular rotation and cadence of meetings. So last week we had our new panelist meeting, which was kind of nuts and bolts for if you wanted to try to become a panelist. This Saturday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, is for a Sunday style meeting for current panelists. So we hope to see you there.